Let's now travel to the other side of the ocean with our guest expert from Canada, Marc Duhamel, who is going to have us dive into business transfer data. Marc, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay,
I've
let
been
me
listening
briefly.
quite. I found the previous presentation quite interesting, in fact. Thank you
Ah,
so much for inviting me today.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I will briefly introduce you, but everybody knows you already for sure. But I will introduce you briefly. So you're the scientific director of the Observatoire du Reprenariat et du Transfert d'entreprises du Québec, created in March 2023 by CETEC, Centre de Transfert d'entreprises du Québec. The aim of the observatory is to measure, analyze, and inform the actors of the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Quebec of the importance of business transfers for the sustainability of businesses in Quebec. You're also professor of economics at the School of Management and researcher at the Institute of Research on SME at the Université du Québec à Trois-Rivières. You are also an active Transeo academic member for many years. So thank you so much for your involvement, your time. You always travel from the other side of the ocean to come to our events. It's always a pleasure. Your recent research focuses on business transfers, of course, but also on hybrid and inclusive entrepreneurship, competition, innovation, and SME management practices. After a 15-year career in the Federal Civil Service, where you were Director of Microeconomic Research on broad public policy issues towards businesses. So now you're really focused on data and working a lot across Quebec and Canada, also with authorities and also with us in Europe to show how we could improve our data in the field of business transfer. That's a huge work that the European Commission has started working on. Transeo is also, of course, concerned and involved, and so that's why it's so nice to have you here to share your expertise in the field. So, Marc, thank you so much. It's early in the morning, not so much now, but thank
Yes.
you for attending this summit, for your time, and I think the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, everyone at Transeo, for the invitation. Thank you to Mirella also for the guidance and the support for to make this presentation. My presentation this morning is really about the lessons learned from the Canadian experience on the value of building data sets. And my goal today is simply to showcase a bit of the lessons learned from the Canadian experience in building these business transfer barometers and how this can enhance and complement the existing information. So I start this presentation. Really, the context is really that we were very fortunate, in fact, to get a reminder that creative destruction is very important for economic growth and across developed countries. As you know, the recent Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to on essentially on creative destruction, and this is a reminder that business dynamics and basically business entry, exit, and churning is a cornerstone not only of innovation but of sustained aggregate economic growth. And given the recent international events and geopolitical turmoil, I think it's important to remind everyone that business dynamics is key to prosperity. Um, One of the key puzzle that I had for many years that led to this work is that the United Nations Manual on Principal Indicators of Business and Trade Statistics have developed for a number of years now standards and methodologies for business and trade on business demography, business dynamics, and entrepreneurship. Most of you are aware of these statistics. They are regularly produced by Eurostat and also by the OECD. In that manual, for example, they provide methodology, they describe it, and they promote its use to produce 16 indicators of business dynamics, demography, and entrepreneurship. But unfortunately, the issue about entry and exit, creative destruction, is very much emphasized. However, the issue of business transfer is not. So my motivation today is really about that the recognition and that data is incomplete to support evidence-based policy making on business transfers, and such that the contribution of business transfer to business dynamics and innovation and economic growth is mostly absent so far. Recent reviews of data collection practices and methodologies have shown that there's a potential for the development of descriptive and predictive data on business transfers, but in reality, these efforts have been mostly underdeveloped, I would say, in Europe, with a few exceptions coming from some countries that have taken the leadership of producing some statistics. So therefore, we are left with comprehensive data is always a need. As we've seen in the previous presentations, data, for example, is used on data on mergers and acquisitions, for example, is used to study the importance of business transfers. But these data are not necessarily comprehensive and not necessarily also representative of the activity of business transfers. So my presentation today is mostly that what European policymakers can learn from the from the Canadian experience, given that in the past few years we've been developing more comprehensive data on business transfers. So the key issue when you start to try to develop data is naturally is to start with definitions. And given the history of or the economic perspective underlying business transfers in data development, business transfer is generally described as a process of passing the ownership. So it is a transaction, an economic exchange, I would say, of passing the ownership and control and authority over the use of the assets to a new business owner. So this makes it a bit difficult because it requires data about ownership of businesses and also about the ability to track businesses through time. That being said, there are many different definitions that have been used, mostly in qualitative study of business transfers. So, for example, the methodology, the definition that has been used by the recent pamphlet from the Euro Chambers is that business transfers is the process of passing a business to a new owner, often with new management. The one I've been using with the co-author that uses the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data is that an entrepreneurial exit with the continuity of activities of the business imply that the business transfer has taken place over in the past year. And there's also more academic definitions that also relate to the transfer of ownership and leadership, for example, or ownership and management from one owner to another. So from those definitions, basically we have two broad sets of data on business transfers. I'm not going to talk much about the individual-centered data on business transfer, what those business transfer do. For example, if you use the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, is you can track not only in an area, but you can track the percentage of the adult population who exited a business and the business continued. You can also track the reasons for those transfers. And these data are useful to understand why an owner, a previous owner, has left the business. Here you have the comparison from 2022. These are regularly, at least me and my colleague at l'Université du Québec at Trois-Rivières, we track how these changes compare internationally since the beginning of the global entrepreneurship. But today, what I want to talk about is much more about business centered, because the population of interest is not the individual owners. So owners can come in and owners can come out. Here, the idea is really about what happens to the business once the owner has changed. When then there are two kinds of data. One is predictive business transfer statistics. This is intends to get an idea about the number or the flow of businesses that will be sold over a certain period of time. In Canada, we use 12, 60 months, but some organizations even go to 120, if not more months. 10 years is quite a lot. But there's also descriptive business transfer statistics, such as the number or percentage of businesses acquired or transferred within the current population of businesses, and also the number or percentage of businesses that were acquired or transferred between two reference periods. So the distinction is between stock and flow. And the recent Canadian experience is that we've been very fortunate in Canada that we have a lot of predictive data on the intention to sell or transfer the business over the next 12 or 60 months. These are come from different business surveys, but more recently, what I've been developing with Statistics Canada is descriptive data on the stock of businesses that are being transferred between one owner and the other using administrative data. So just give you an idea about what these data do. So here is what can be done in Canada about predictive business transfers. Here you have, since 2021, you have the cycle of business transfer. So just to give you an idea, in Canada, we have about 1 million employer businesses across the country. So here you can see the evolution through time of the intention to sell or transfer the business. On the evolution in gray, you have the evolution of the intention to close the business. Of course, you can see this changes from trimester to trimester. This really helps improve, as we were mentioning, if the intention is a determinant of the action of transferring a business, then of course, studying the intention to transfer a business, for example, linking this to a survey that intends to help a transmitter to assess their readiness to transfer this data is very useful. So what we learned from this is that, of course, there is cycle, okay, over the business cycle. To intention to sell is obviously related to the financing. Okay, so it's reflects the drivers of the market for the demand and the supply of business and the market. And in Canada, it's quite a lot. So we have more than 50,000 companies in Canada that say they intend to proceed with a sale or transfer of business over the next 12 months in the third quarter of 2025. Generally, what we also observe is that the intention to transfer over the next 12 months is less than the intention to transfer over the next 60 months. And we start to assess really the risk rate, the failure rate of intention with that. But over the last few years, what we've been really doing is trying to get a better idea about business transfers, really the volume of activity related to the transfer of ownership between one owner and the other. And this was done using administrative data. So what we've done is we've developed a database where we can identify firms where, one, the primary owner is identified as the individual with the highest percentage of the share of capital held in an industry. Changes of an enterprise changes between 1 year and the other. So what that really enables us is to monitor not just full transfer. So when an individual goes majority ownership or full ownership of a business to a majority ownership and full ownership to another individual, but it also allows us to see where instances where the previous owner had a minority share but was the main owner or the primary owner of a business, and the year after that, the gradual transfer of ownership and a gradual transfer of the title, for example, going from CFO to CEO of the company, makes fundamental changes to who owns and controls the enterprise. So, since we use administrative data, we've developed this environment called the linkable file environment of enterprise. This data set includes 32 different linkable business data sets, and this allows us to match ownership information with business information. And with business information, of course, then you have a lot of other administrative data. And with the ownership information, you also have a lot of information about the socio-demographic profile of the owner. So what we focused on in this database is we include all active companies with 1 and 499 employees that have more than 30,000 in annual income. And the enterprise owners match database contains, for the period of 2015 to 2022, more than 8 million observations. So basically 900,000 per year observation of enterprises over, as I said, generally in Canada, we have about 1 million. So the rate is very high, such that we can identify a primary owner manager of a company in 2 subsequent years for 97.4% of the total population of employee database. So just imagine, so every year we have basically 900,000 observation. And so once we have those observations, then we can include transfer that occur over more than 2 years. So, for example, if a transfer is just gradual, we eventually are able to detect it. So we include it in that year. And currently, unfortunately, it excludes enterprises with foreign primary owners. This is something we're currently doing to try to improve our data set. So what do we find with this, right? What's the value of doing all this work? Well, the first one is that we can actually measure the rate of business transfers in Canada. You can see from the graph on the right, in the black line, you have the business transfer rate. And you can see that in 2022, the rate is 6.31% of all SMEs with employees. And that is the highest rate since 2015, which is the reference year we've used for methodological reason. That represents basically the 6.31%. It represents more than 57,000 transfers that have occurred. And that's an increase of almost 27% since 2015. So that's very large. And if you look at the difference between 2021 and 2022, right, trying to match the predictive data with the descriptive data, well, the increase in 2022 also matched the increase of intentions to transfer the business over the next 12 months that went from 3.2% in 2021 to 4.6% in 2022. Why that number is very important, okay, why this approach is very important, is because the volume of business transfer, like almost 60,000 that I just showed you, is vastly more voluminous than the figures that you would get from using other information sources. So in Canada, we basically use either the mergers and acquisition outlook from PricewaterhouseCoopers, okay? And those you can see on the left scale, we have in 2022, we have about 2,500 businesses. So that's 19 times more. We are able to find 19 times more business transfers that what you would infer from the Price and Waterhouse Cooper mergers and acquisition outlook. And if you were to actually do the work of looking at what is reported in business registered, not looking at who is the primary owner, then you get about 3 times as much activity in business transfers. So the point is that when you use that methodology, you actually find that business transfers is much more prevalent, in fact, than mergers and acquisition. So if you are looking to mergers and acquisition, you are missing a lot of the action about business transfer. Second point that we also find is that one of the reasons I think why we don't have a methodology for business transfer is that there's this perception that business transfers, one, uh, it's an economic activity between private individuals. Government should not get involved in that. But it is also because there is this perception that if you look at SMEs, right, the bottom line here, that the birth and entry and death rate, right, the creative destruction, what has traditionally been labeled creative destruction, is much more prevalent than business transfer. Well, that is true, but mostly that result comes from the activity of birth and death actually coming from the 1 to 4 employee categories. If you look at any other type, okay, of SMEs, like the SMEs that are larger, more profitable, more productive, then you actually see here that for Canada, the actual business transfer rate, right, is more than double the actual birth and death rate. So that suggests that business transfer, right, if you consider the creative destruction not about buying and selling new products and new services, but buying and selling established businesses as well, then you get a better appreciation about how market transfer actually happens. So one, it's more prevalent. Two, in fact, business transfer, depending on the size of the business, can actually be more important than business birth and death. And the other result is that when you start to hook up the data set about business transfer to the sales of the number of employees of these businesses, the revenue, their earnings before income tax, the book value of the assets, and so forth, the finding you also find is that the economic financial impact of business transfer is in fact much larger than on business birth or startups, right? Most people would say, well, that is very reasonable. That's expected. But the other part is that it's also more important than continuing businesses. Okay, so a business that doesn't change owner is has less employee, less revenue, less earning before income, less book value of assets, and less revenue per employee. And so, therefore, it really shows that business transfer really targets the jewel of an entrepreneurship ecosystem. The second issue that comes out from this is that because those are the crown jewels, then a lot of the discussion about business transfers as a mode to encourage young people to become entrepreneur, in fact, is not really well suited, in fact, to the evidence. Why? Because young people don't have as much financial resources to acquire a business. And so just to give you an example, in Quebec, we had about 8,000 business transfers in 2022. And you can see that out of these 8,000 business transfers, only 575 were acquired by a new owner that is age 29 years old or younger, but more than 3,000 ones were acquired by new owners that are age 55 years old and older. So financial resources is a key determinant about a business transfer. And if in fact, to acquire a jewel of an entrepreneurial ecosystem actually requires a lot more financial capital than I think some of the policy drivers are anticipating. So one, we know it's more prevalent. Two, it's more important the larger the firm sizes. Two, three, it targets the crown jewel. Three, it does represent some risk, but it's lower risk, in fact, than startups. Well, some would say, well, that's obvious, but it's also it represents, after a 5 year, it only represents an increased risk of failure of 5% compared to a business that doesn't transfer ownership. So the survival rate, in fact, is much higher than continuing businesses if these companies are being coached or mentored or assisted compared to a continuing business. So basically, what this data really allows us to get an idea is really about the impact of the drivers and the impact of about business transfer. They are much more important than previously thought. They are much more important also in terms of productivity. And now the key issue relating, going back to my introduction, is how does this relate to productivity and innovation? Well, in the spring of this year, we are currently working on this. We'll be publishing about the impact of business transfers on R&D spending and productivity growth post-transfer compared to startups and also compared to firms that don't change ownership. So basically, the conclusion is that what we did in Canada over the last few years is really a proof of concept that descriptive and predictive data on business transfers can support the development of a productive and thriving business transfer marketplace. And that, of course, before we had these statistics, everyone thought that, there is activity, it's private activity, but no one suspected that it was so much important in terms of not only in terms of prevalence, incidents, and also in terms of economic impact. So I think that all this, what it says is that I think the Canadian experience is an opportunity for Transeo member, the industry and the academic community of Transeo member to actually express support and offer assistance to develop these type of data sets, these type of data to provide business barometers that can be used to, one, support policy development, and two, also, it really increases the awareness of the ecosystem to actually come up and put resources to assist business transfers, both on the seller side and on the buyer side. So, of course, here's the detail about what I've been doing over the last several years. These are reports about what we've done in Quebec and in Canada to support business transfer in Canada. And if you want to contact me or you want to reach out to discuss some of these research findings, here's the details. Please do not hesitate. I'd be happy to take your questions now.
Thank you so much, Marc. Really insightful, and we're going to work on it for sure because there's a lot to do in Europe with data. So thank you so much. Are there questions or comments? We have 1 or 2 minutes for Marc. If not, please contact us because we'll continue working on data with Transeo, with our lobby committee, academic committee. So it's really an important topic to show policymakers the weight of business transfers and to measure also the evolution of the phenomenon. So thank you so much, Marc. You can go back to bed, but otherwise you can stay with us. No, just kidding.
Thank you
again for your insights, really insightful.